I'm Emma Watson, and this is the story of how my stepfamily's cruelty led to their ultimate downfall. Sometimes karma takes its time, but when it strikes hard. My life changed forever when I was 16. My father, a successful real estate developer, remarried Diana Pierce, a woman who could have given masterclasses in deception. She came with her daughter, Victoria, who was my age but possessed none of my father's values about hard work and humility. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Diana was perfect when my father was around, caring, supportive, and seemingly interested in my academic achievements. But the moment he left for business trips, her true colors emerged like storm clouds on a sunny day. Your father may have built this empire, she would say, examining her manicured nails. But now it's time for some improvements. Those improvements started with moving me from my bedroom to the basement, claiming Victoria needed my room for her studying space. My father, constantly traveling for work, never knew about these changes. Diana made sure of that. I didn't fight back then. I was young, grieving my mother's passing and desperate to make this new family work. So I accepted the basement, the hand-me-downs, and the constant reminders that I was now considered little more than household help. Victoria took particular joy in her new role as the mansion's princess. Bring me my breakfast, she'd command every morning. And make sure the coffee's hot this time, servant girl. Her friends from our private school loved this dynamic, often joining in on the torment. But what they didn't know was that I had inherited my father's business acumen. While they thought I was just doing household chores, I was actually learning everything about our family's business. Every night, after finishing their demands, I would study business management, real estate law, and investment strategies online. My father noticed my interest during his brief times home. "You remind me of myself at your age," he'd say proudly, sharing insights about his latest projects. These moments were precious, not just for the knowledge gained, but because they were the only times I felt like myself again. Then came the tragedy that would change everything. My father's private jet crashed during a business trip to Europe. The news hit our household like a bomb, but not for the same reasons. While I was genuinely grieving my father, Diana and Victoria were already planning how to spend what they assumed would be their inheritance. Finally, I overheard Victoria telling her friends, "We can get rid of the basement dweller and live like we deserve." Diana was similarly occupied, making calls about renovating the mansion and discussing plans to sell some of my father's prized properties. What they didn't know was that my father had seen through their facade long ago. During one of our late-night business discussions, just months before his death, he had made arrangements that would protect both me and his legacy. "Emma," he had said, his voice serious, "I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, stay strong and patient. Everything I've built, everything I've taught you, it's all for a reason." The day of the will reading arrived, and Diana arranged for it to take place in our mansion's main hall. She invited all her friends and family, clearly expecting to put on a show of gracious wealth transfer. Victoria sat next to her, both of them dressed in designer black outfits that looked more appropriate for a fashion show than a will reading. I sat quietly in the corner, wearing the simple black dress I had bought with my saved allowance. Diana had forgotten to take me shopping for appropriate mourning attire. The family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, began reading the will. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically as he got to the main provisions. My father had left the entire business empire, including the mansion, to me. Diana and Victoria were to receive a modest monthly allowance contingent on their treatment of me. "This is impossible." Diana shrieked, her perfect composure cracking. "She's just a child. She can't run a business." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Miss Watson has been secretly apprenticing under her father for the past 2 years. She's already completed several business management courses and has been involved in key company decisions." Victoria jumped up, her face red with rage. "She lives in the basement. She's nothing but a maid. Daddy wouldn't do this to me." That's when I finally spoke up. "Your father didn't do anything to you, Victoria. My father simply protected what was rightfully mine." I pulled out a folder containing photos of my original bedroom, documentation of their mistreatment, and copies of all my business certifications. "You've been spying on us?" Diana gasped, realizing the implications. "No," I replied calmly. "I've been protecting myself and my father's legacy. Every cruel word, every degrading task, every time you tried to hide my achievements from him, it's all documented." The room fell silent as I stood up, no longer the basement dweller they had tried to create. "You have 2 choices. I continued. You can accept the terms of the will, show genuine change, and receive your allowance. Or you can challenge it and risk losing everything, including the proof of your behavior going public. Diana's carefully crafted mask finally crumbled completely. She lunged for the folder in my hands, but Mr. Harrison's assistants were quicker, blocking her path. You ungrateful little snake, she spat. After everything we've done for you. I couldn't help but laugh. Everything you've done for me? Let's list those things. Moved me to the basement, treated me like a servant, tried to isolate me from my father. Should I continue? The next few hours were chaos as Diana and Victoria tried every tactic they knew. Tears, threats, accusations of manipulation. But my father had been thorough. The will was ironclad, and my documentation of their treatment left no room for legal challenges. As the lawyers finished explaining the details, I stood up to leave the room. But this wasn't the end, it was barely the beginning. Diana and Victoria's true colors were about to show themselves in ways that would shock even me. And the real battle for my father's legacy was just beginning. They had no idea that the quiet girl they banished to the basement had been preparing for this moment all along. The next few weeks would test not just my resolve, but everything my father had taught me about business, strength, and justice. As I walked up to what would soon be my office in the mansion's main wing, I could hear Victoria's angry screams and Diana's threats echoing through the halls. But for the first time since my father's death, I felt at peace. The real story was about to unfold, and I was finally ready to take my place as my father's true heir. Little did they know, their attempts to break me had only made me stronger, and their worst nightmare was just beginning. The days following the will reading were like walking through a minefield. Diana and Victoria refused to leave the mansion, claiming they needed time to process the situation. In reality, they were plotting their next move, and I knew it wouldn't be pretty. I wasn't surprised when the first attack came through social media. Victoria had always been skilled at manipulating narratives, and now she was painting herself as the victim. Posts about how her stepsister had manipulated their dying father and how family betrayal cuts deep started circulating among our social circle. Diana took a more direct approach. She began reaching out to my father's business associates, spinning tales about my youth and inexperience. Emma is just a child playing with her father's legacy, she would say, her voice dripping with fake concern. Someone needs to step in before she destroys everything he built. What they didn't realize was that I had spent the past 2 years not just learning the business, but building relationships with every key player. My father had made sure of that. One morning, I found Diana in my father's old office, now my office, rifling through documents. Looking for something, I asked, startling her. She straightened up, trying to maintain her dignity. These files contain sensitive information about the business. As your stepmother, I have a responsibility to protect your father's interests. I walked to the desk and pressed a button underneath. Within seconds, security appeared at the door. These gentlemen will escort you back to your designated area of the house, I said calmly. And Diana? The next time you enter this office without permission, you'll be removed from the property entirely. Her face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little witch. I raised you. No, I corrected her. You imprisoned me. There's a difference. That afternoon, I called an emergency board meeting. It was time to show everyone exactly what I had learned during my years in the basement. The boardroom was packed. Several members looked skeptical when I walked in, exactly as Diana had hoped. She and Victoria sat at the far end, smugly waiting for me to fail. I connected my laptop to the projector and began my presentation. Over the past 2 years, I've identified several inefficiencies in our current business model I started. The screen filled with detailed analytics and projections. I've developed a comprehensive plan to increase our property values by 40% within 18 months. The room fell silent as I walked them through my strategy. It involved modernizing our properties with smart technology, implementing green energy solutions, and developing a proprietary property management app that would streamline operations. This is ridiculous, Victoria interrupted. She's been living in our basement. What could she possibly know about property management? I smiled. Interesting you should ask. With a click, another slide appeared, showing the test results of my property management app, already successfully implemented in 3 of our smaller properties. The efficiency metrics were unprecedented. One of the board members, Mr. Chen, leaned forward. You developed this while living in the basement. Among other things, I replied. Would you like to see the revenue projections? By the end of my presentation, the board was stalled. Even Diana's carefully planted seeds of doubt had been completely overturned. But they weren't done fighting yet. That evening, I found Victoria in tears, sitting in the mansion's grand staircase. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I heard her on the phone. Yes, the photos are ready to be leaked. Once people see how she lived in the basement, they'll have to investigate father's death. No one would leave everything to someone they treated like a servant. I cleared my throat. Victoria spun around, dropping her phone in shock. Interesting strategy, I said, picking up her phone. Except there's one problem. I chose to stay in that basement. What are you talking about? We forced you. I pulled out my own phone and played a recording. A conversation with my father from a year ago. In it, we discussed my choice to stay in the basement, using it as cover while I learned the business. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. His voice echoed through the hall. Let them think they're winning, Emma. A good business person knows when to play the long game. Victoria's face went pale. You planned this? No, Victoria. You and your mother planned this. I just chose not to be a victim. The next morning, I called a family meeting. Diana and Victoria arrived looking nervous, the first time I'd seen them anything less than arrogant. Here's the situation, I began. Your recent attempts to undermine me have violated the terms of my father's will. I could cut off your allowance completely. Their faces fell, but I continued. However, I'm offering you a choice. I laid out 2 envelopes on the table. Option 1. You accept a one-time payment to relocate, sign an NDA about your treatment of me, and never contact me again. Option 2. You stay, but with new terms. You'll work for the company, starting from entry-level positions, and earn your place like everyone else. Diana laughed bitterly. Work? Like common employees. Exactly like common employees, I confirmed. No special treatment, no shortcuts. You'll learn the business from the ground up, just like I did. Victoria looked between her mother and me, then did something unexpected. She reached for the second envelope. I'll take option 2, she said quietly. Diana was horrified. Victoria, what are you doing? Learning from my mistakes, mother, she replied. Emma's offering us a chance to earn respect instead of demanding it. Maybe it's time we tried that. Diana stormed out, choosing option 1 by default. The papers were signed by the end of the week, and she left the mansion, moving to a smaller city where she had family. Victoria surprised everyone by throwing herself into her entry-level position. It wasn't easy. Years of privilege had left her unprepared for real work. But slowly, she began to change. We weren't friends, but we developed a professional respect that neither of us had thought possible. 1 year later, I stood in my father's old office, now truly mine, looking out over the city skyline. Our property management app had revolutionized the industry, our green energy initiatives had earned numerous awards, and our property values had increased by 55%, exceeding even my projections. Victoria knocked on my door, holding a report. She'd recently been promoted to junior project manager, purely on merit. The Richardson property renovation is complete, she said, under budget and ahead of schedule. I nodded, remembering how she used to treat me. Good work. She paused at the door. Emma, I'm sorry. For everything. I know, I replied. That's why you're still here. Today, the company continues to grow beyond even my father's dreams. Diana occasionally tries to contact me through lawyers, but her threats hold no power anymore. The basement where I once lived has been converted into a state-of-the-art training center for employees. A reminder that success can grow in the darkest places if you plant the right seeds. My father's portrait hangs in my office, and sometimes I imagine him smiling at how his plan worked out. He taught me that true strength isn't about power or revenge. It's about having the patience to wait for the right moment and the wisdom to know what to do when it arrives. People often ask me if I regret those years in the basement. I tell them the truth. That basement wasn't my prison. It was my cocoon. While they thought they were breaking me, I was transforming. And when the time came to spread my wings, I soared higher than anyone, especially my stepfamily, ever imagined possible. The greatest revenge isn't in watching your enemies fall. It's in rising so high that they can't help but look up and wonder how they missed your potential all along. Sometimes the person they try to bury turns out to be the one who plants the seeds of their own garden of success. As I watched the sun set over my father's, Now my empire, I can't help but smile. Every building in view tells a story of resilience, of patience, and of the sweet satisfaction of proving that success is the best revenge. But more than revenge, it's about honoring those who believed in you and proving that their faith was well placed. In the end, this isn't just a story about overcoming a cruel stepfamily. It's about the power of quiet determination, the strength found in patience, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the longest road leads to the best destination. The basement dweller they mocked now owns the entire house. And that's just the beginning of my story.